Welcome back to the channel, you guys. Hope you're having a great day today. In this video, we're checking out the EASTMAN SB59. So this is a really interesting instrument, and we're going to get into the nitty-gritty details and of course give you guys a bunch of tones, but there's a few things I want to note right off the bat. The first thing is that this guitar is completely handmade. No CNC machine has touched any part of this instrument. Hand carved, the neck, the body, everything is done by hand. Now secondly is the weight. EASTMAN won't ship these out if they weigh more than 7.9 pounds. This is one of the first things I noted about this guitar. I picked it up, I'm like, whoa, this thing must be like hollow in the center. It's not. It's solid mahogany back, solid maple top. It's not a veneer, it's a thick maple top, solid mahogany neck and headstock. So sometimes manufacturers will, shoot the main piece of mahogany through the center and then they'll glue on the wings on either side. Not so here. Solid headstock, solid neck, solid body. Now my Les Paul Traditional weighs probably 2.5 pounds more than this. And, a Les Paul Standard or something with modern weight relief, it's got channels and Swiss cheese under the top, right, to shed weight. Not so here. Solid body, and they're all going to be between 7 and 7.9 pounds. And thirdly is the antique varnish finish. Very different from anything I've played before. Now, EASTMAN does have some nitro finishes and non-translucent finishes, as well as, more traditional bursts. But this is just really unique, and it comes from their line of violins. So they've taken this finish and brought it over to their solid body guitars, some of their arch tops and mandolins and stuff like that. So very interesting finish. Again, it's put on by hand, so no spray booth, none of that. It's all handmade, including the finish. So right away, those were some of the things I noted that really set this apart from the crowd. All right, so let's dive a little deeper. We're going to talk about the specs, the overall construction, the tones, of course, and my final thoughts. Let's get started. All right, so let's start with the specs. Now, of course, I'm going to link to this guitar in the video description below for people who want all the specs. I'm going to hit up some of the highlights. Here we go. Now, I've been playing on this guitar for about a month. I like to really get to know a piece of gear before I demo it. So as I go through some of the specs, I'll give you guys some of my thoughts on how it affects, playability or whatever as we go through. Let's start up on the headstock. So very plain and vintage looking. You get these aged Keystone tuners. Don't fret, these are not Gibson Deluxe tuning machines. I've had, I think, those on 2 of my guitars, and I did not like them. So much slop and play in the system, they were garbage. So even though these kind of look like that, they are not. These are from the Godot Relic series, and they are tight and they're responsive and they look amazing. So no issues at all with the tuning machines. Next up is the nut, and EASTMAN is not messing around. If your nut isn't cut properly or it uses the wrong material, your guitar will not hold tune. Check this out. This is a bone nut, beautifully, beautifully cut. You will not see a nut cut this nice on certain other big brands, shall we say. This is absolutely amazing, and I'm happy to say, even though it's a traditional design, between the tuning machines and the nut, this thing just holds tune. That's what happens when you get a proper luthier to set up and cut the nut. Now, obviously, the EASTMAN 59 is built as close as possible to those vintage guitars, and that translates to the neck profile as well. Whereas another company might slap, 59 on one of their models and use whatever neck profile is popular, these guys used a proper neck profile. So we've got a soft V. So a little bit, less full through the shoulders and a little bit fuller through the spine. And of course that corresponds to how your hand hits the neck, sort of makes a natural V anyway, so it is comfortable, but a little bit, different than what you would find on some other guitars. Now really the only area I've found on this guitar that deviates from, some of those vintage designs is we get an Ebony Fingerboard, which is usually only found on Les Paul Customs, which was, a feature requested by Les Paul. So really nice upgrade here. We get a nice dark Ebony Fingerboard with those bright perloid inlays. All right, so let's blast through some of the other specs. As I mentioned before, one-piece mahogany body. So no weight relief, no 3 pieces laminated, 1 big old chunk of mahogany. Again, weighs under 8 pounds. Absolutely amazing. You can see some of the finish is worn in. Again, tastefully done. So a little bit right here as well. You can just see some discoloring in the finish. So really nice. Aged hardware. It's all Goto. Okay, so really great stuff. Lawler pickups specifically wound for this model. So again, Lawler makes super high-end stuff. Switchcraft switch, Switchcraft output, CTS pots. So there's really no area on this guitar where they compromised at all. All right, so those are the main specs. Again, you guys can check the link if you want like line by line specs, but those are the highlights. Super high-end hardware, pickups, electronics, and woods. Let's move on. All right, so let's move on to overall construction. Like I said before, I've been playing on it for about a month. So here are the things I've noticed and appreciated about this guitar. First of all, unlike some of my other guitars, there is no gap between the body and the binding. On some of those other single cuts, as you run your hand from the body to the binding, you will notice a very prominent lip where the person constructing it didn't match the height of the body to the binding, and then they just finished over it. And you'll feel like a really strong lip here, and you'll feel a really strong lip right there. Happy to say on this guitar, which is also handmade, right? That other brand, they're handmade, and so they say, or people say, you can expect some quirks with a handmade guitar. Well, not here. The binding and the body is matched up perfectly all the way around. You don't feel a lip anywhere. It's just a smooth, beautiful experience. And it's not slathered in poly like, you know, some of the lower end brands. So it is a very light finish. They say it's lighter than nitro even. So there's no excuses. This is just built well. So that's the first thing I've noticed. I know it's something small, but you know, when I can do a direct comparison, I can notice some of these differences. Now, the other thing I checked for right away is if there was any dripping or glooping of the finish right here under the neck, which can happen if you're not paying attention or if you're doing like whatever 100 guitars a day. Thankfully, this one is constructed beautifully. So overall construction on this guitar is 10 out of 10. There's really nothing amiss about this guitar. It's made absolutely beautifully. Like I said, no CNC, all by hand. Usually on guitars like that, you'll find some quirks. I can't find any quirks on this guitar. You know, considering it's supposed to be a vintage design, there's nothing on this guitar that is out of place or, you know, built poorly. It's absolutely been stable for me over the month I've played it. The one thing I don't like about this guitar, there's one tiny thing that can easily be fixed, is the strap buttons are way too small. So I think these are still, if memory serves, these are still like the Goto aged hardware to match the tuning machines and the bridge and everything, but they're just too small. I prefer something much bigger. That is like the tiniest of things. That's the only thing I don't really like about this guitar. I'd like oversized buttons just to, you know, hold it on the strap really securely. But the Lawlers sound amazing. We're gonna, you know, transition into our tone test right away. But overall, like I said, constructions 10 out of 10. All right, so let's start our tone test. As per usual, I'm going to be using the Blue Angel amp, and we're going to be using the True North Tweed drive right off the bat here. I'm just going to do some informal noodling for you guys. I'm going to use the tone controls, the volume controls, and just see how dynamic this guitar can be. Let's check it out. All right, so now that we've got an initial vibe for this guitar, let's do some riffs. We'll do some clean, some light overdrive, and some heavy. Let's check it out. And finally, let's throw this baby in a mix, see how it sits there. Let's do our 1 minute solo. So here are my final thoughts. I knew this guitar was going to be very, very interesting. All handmade, all the best woods, all the best electronics, all the best hardware, not an area of compromise on this guitar. And when you're talking about a vintage instrument, there's certain things you have to overcome to have it hold tune and perform perfectly. And you can't just be precise, you have to be perfect. And I'm happy to say the setup, the nut, all the hardware, the tuning machines, the action, everything was set up perfectly. And I've been playing on it, like I said, numerous times for a month. I would have, discovered some of the quirks. So happy to say that these guys weren't just precise on this model, they were perfect. Now maybe I shouldn't have been so skeptical or so surprised by this guitar, but it's made in China. Very different than other custom shops that I'm used to. So Eastman has their own facility there where they make, violins, mandolins, jazz guitars, acoustic guitars, solid body guitars, all in-house with their own people. And if their instruments are anything like this, they're making amazing guitars. Now as for the tones, it's a little bit of a no-brainer. You get Lawler Imperial humbuckers, which are amazing, custom wound for this model. So depending on what amp you use and what pedals, obviously it'll change the tone, but the guitar in its stock form sounds amazing. So at the end of the day, this guitar is what it purports to be, an amazing vintage inspired design. So if you're into like the vintage guitars, or maybe you've got like a Strat and Tele and you want to move to something, you know, a little bit more classic, check one of these out, play them back to back with other brands, compare price wise. But if, like I said, if any of their other instruments are similar to this, I think you'll be surprised. Thanks so much for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed the demo. Feel free to check out the t-shirts and the tab store on your way out. Have an awesome week. Take care.